Park Junho pushed his cleaning cart through the narrow hallway of Galactic Research Station Horizon. The wheels made a soft sound against the metal floor. He stopped in front of air vent number 47 and pulled out his tools. This was his life. Cleaning vents, fixing filters, making sure the air stayed fresh for the brilliant minds who lived and worked on this station. The station floated in deep space, far from any star. It was home to over 3,000 scientists from 23 different species. They had all come here for one reason: to solve the Axiom cipher. Junho had heard about the cipher many times. Everyone on the station talked about it. 200 years ago, explorers had found a strange object floating in empty space. It was the size of a small moon, and its surface was covered with strange symbols and patterns. The scientists believed it was left behind by an ancient species called the Precursors. No one knew what happened to them. They had disappeared millions of years ago. The patterns on the object were supposed to contain the secret to unlimited clean energy. At least, that was what the scientists believed. Every species in the galaxy wanted that secret. So they built this station and sent their smartest people to crack the code. For 200 years, they had failed. Junho finished cleaning the vent and moved on to the next one. He was 34 years old. Back on Earth, he had been good at puzzle games. Very good. He had won several competitions. But that did not matter here. Here, he was just the maintenance guy. The human who fixed things. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had only made contact with alien species 50 years ago. Compared to the Melkari, who had traveled between stars for 10,000 years, humans were like children. Nobody expected much from them. Junho did not mind. He liked his simple job. He liked watching the scientists work without being part of their stress. And the pay was good enough to send money home to his mother in Bizan. His cart's wheels squeaked as he turned a corner. He was heading toward the main observation deck. This was where the big holographic display showed the Axiom cipher. Scientists gathered there every day to stare at it and argue about what it meant. Junho usually avoided this area. Too many important people who looked at him like he was invisible. But today, one of the air sensors was giving wrong readings, and he needed to check it. The observation deck was a massive circular room with windows that showed the stars. In the center, floating above a raised platform, was the hologram of the cipher. It was beautiful in a strange way. Hundreds of lines and curves and symbols, all connected in patterns that seemed to move when you looked at them. Today, the deck was nearly empty. Most scientists were in their labs, running more calculations on their computers. Only two figures stood near the hologram. One was Vith Ora, the lead scientist of the Melkari species. She was tall and thin, with 6 limbs and skin that looked like blue crystal. When light hit her, she sparkled. She had been working on the cipher for 47 years. The other was Prime Nexus Thul, a representative of the Galactic Science Collective. He was an Orvani, a species that looked like floating clouds of purple gas held together by some invisible force. His voice came from everywhere at once. Junho tried to stay quiet as he checked the sensor near the wall. But he could hear their conversation clearly. "The latest calculations have failed," Vethora said. Her voice sounded tired. "Our quantum systems ran for 3 months. They found nothing." "This is unacceptable," Prime Nexus Thul replied. His voice vibrated through the room. "The collective has invested tremendous resources. 23 species. Billions of credits. 2 centuries of work. I am aware." Veth Ora's crystal skin flickered with emotion. "Every mathematical approach has been attempted. Every logical framework. The cipher appears to be solvable, but it never yields. It is as if the precursors are mocking us." Junho glanced at the hologram while pretending to work on the sensor. The patterns seemed to dance before his eyes. Something about them felt strange. Not wrong, exactly. Just off. Like a picture hanging crooked on a wall. He shook his head and looked away. What did he know about ancient alien puzzles? He fixed air vents for a living. But the feeling stayed with him. That evening, Junho sat in the cafeteria with his friend Kim Yuna. She was 29 years old and worked as a junior xenolinguist, studying alien languages. They had become friends because they were both Korean and both felt like outsiders on the station. "You look distracted," Yuna said, picking at her food. "Bad day?" "I saw the cipher today," Junho said. "The big hologram. Everyone has seen it. It is displayed everywhere." "I know, but this time, I really looked at it, and something felt strange." Yuna raised an eyebrow. "Strange how?" Junho struggled to find the right words. "Like it was upside down. Or sideways. Like I was looking at it from the wrong angle." Yuna laughed. "You sound like a scientist now. Maybe you should tell Vethora your theory." "She would not listen to me. I am nobody." "You are not nobody. You are Park Junho, 3-time puzzle champion of Seoul." He smiled a little. "That was a long time ago. And those were simple puzzles. This is different. Maybe it is not as different as you think." Before Junho could respond, the lights in the cafeteria flickered. A moment later, a voice came over the speakers. It was the station's emergency system. "Attention all personnel. This is a priority alert. The precursor artifact has begun emitting unusual energy pulses. All non-essential staff should prepare for possible evacuation. Research teams report to your stations immediately." The cafeteria erupted in noise. People stood up, talking over each other, rushing toward the exits. Yuna grabbed her bag. "I have to go. They will need translators. What is happening?" "I do not know. But those pulses, they started 3 days ago, and they are getting stronger. Some scientists think the artifact might be counting down to something." "Counting down to what?" Yuna's face was serious. "Nobody knows. That is what scares them." She hurried away, leaving Junho alone at the table. Around him, the cafeteria emptied. Through the window, he could see the distant shape of the artifact, a dark sphere against the stars. The feeling came back. That nagging sense that something was wrong. That the answer was simple, if only someone would look at it the right way. But who would listen to a maintenance worker? Junho picked up his tray and carried it to the recycling station. Tomorrow, he would go back to cleaning vents and fixing filters. That was his job. That was his place. Still, as he walked back to his small room, he could not stop thinking about the cipher. The patterns played behind his eyes like a song he could not quite remember. Somewhere in deep space, the ancient artifact pulsed again. And again. And again. The countdown continued. The puzzle took supercomputers years. He tilted his head and said, "Just turn it upside down." Part 2 3 days passed. The artifact's pulses grew stronger. Jun-Ho continued his work, moving through the station's hallways with his cart. But everything felt different now. Scientists rushed past him without seeing him. Emergency meetings happened every few hours. The fear in the air was thick enough to taste. He found himself returning to the observation deck again and again. Each time, he told himself he was just checking sensors or cleaning vents nearby. But the truth was simpler. He could not stop looking at the cipher. The hologram floated in the center of the room, rotating slowly. Hundreds of scientists had studied it. Thousands of computers had analyzed it. Yet it remained unsolved. And every time Junho looked at it, the same feeling returned. Something was wrong with how they were seeing it. On the 4th night, he sat in his small room with a notebook. He had started sketching the patterns he remembered from the cipher. His hand moved without much thought, drawing lines and curves on the paper. When he finished, he looked at what he had created. It was not perfect. He was not an artist, but the basic shapes were there. He tilted his head and looked at the sketch from a different angle. Nothing changed. But the feeling was still there. That itch in his brain that told him the answer was close. The next morning, he was fixing a broken light panel in one of the engineering corridors. Lee Tae-min, a senior engineer, walked past and stopped. "What are you doing?" Tae-min asked. He was 45 years old with gray hair and a tired face. He had been on the station for 15 years. "Fixing the lights, sir." Tae-min noticed a notebook sticking out of Junho's pocket. "What is that?" Before Junho could stop him, Tae-min pulled out the notebook and flipped through the pages. His eyes widened as he saw the sketches. "Are these the cipher patterns?" Junho felt his face grow hot. "I was just drawing. It helps me think. You have been drawing the most complex mathematical puzzle in the galaxy during your breaks? I know it is stupid. I am sorry." But Tae-min did not look angry. He looked curious. He studied the sketches more closely, turning the notebook at different angles. "These are not accurate copies," he said. "You have drawn them from different viewpoints. I did not mean to change them. That is just how I remembered them. The computers always show the cipher from the same angle, the same orientation that was documented when it was first discovered. But you," Tae-min paused, "you drew it as if you were standing in different places around it." Junho did not know what to say. It had never occurred to him that this was unusual. Tae-min handed back the notebook. "Keep thinking, Park. Sometimes the strangest ideas come from the strangest places." He walked away, shaking his head. Later that day, Junho met Yuna for lunch. She looked exhausted. Dark circles had formed under her eyes. "I have not slept in 2 days," she said. "They have us translating everything. Every symbol. Every mark. Trying to find some clue the mathematicians missed. Have you found anything?" "Maybe." She lowered her voice. "I discovered something about the precursors. They had multiple forms of visual perception. Some of them saw light we cannot see. Others saw the world from many angles at once, like having eyes on all sides of their head." Junho leaned forward. "What does that mean for the cipher?" "I am not sure yet. I mentioned it to my supervisor, but she said it was not relevant. The mathematical structure is what matters, not how the precursors saw things. But what if it does matter? What if the way they saw things changes the meaning?" Yuna smiled weakly. "You sound like a scientist again." "I am serious. Think about it. When the first explorers found the artifact, they recorded it from their own point of view, their own orientation. And every species since then has used that same recording, that same angle. So what if that angle is wrong?" Yuna stared at him for a long moment. "That is actually an interesting question. I should ask Kelix about it." "Who is Kelix?" "A young Melkari. She is Vethor's assistant. She is nicer than most of them. She actually listens to humans." That afternoon, Yuna brought Junho's question to Kelix. The young Melkari had pale blue crystal skin, lighter than Vethor's. She considered the question carefully. "It is true that the original documentation established a standard orientation," Kelix said. "All species have viewed the cipher the same way ever since. It never occurred to anyone to question it." "But should someone question it?" Yuna asked. "Perhaps. The precursors were very different from us. Their perception of space and direction was not the same as ours. It is possible that what we consider up meant nothing to them." That night, Junho could not sleep. He lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. The artifact's pulses were now strong enough to be felt through the station's walls. A soft vibration that came and went like a heartbeat. The evacuation had begun. Non-essential staff were being sent to nearby ships. Junho had received a notice that he would leave tomorrow, but he could not stop thinking about what Yuna had said. Multiple forms of perception, different angles, different viewpoints. He pulled out his notebook and looked at his sketches again. He turned the pages upside down, and suddenly he saw it. The lines that had seemed chaotic now formed patterns. The curves that had seemed random now flowed together. It was like looking at one of those trick pictures from his childhood. The kind where you saw an old woman until you turned it around and saw a young girl instead. The cipher was not a puzzle that needed to be solved. It was a picture that needed to be turned upside down. Jun-ho jumped out of bed and grabbed his communicator. He called Yuna, not caring that it was the middle of the night. "Yuna! Wake up," her sleepy voice answered. "Junho? What time is it? Has anyone tried looking at the cipher upside down?" There was a long pause. "What did you say?" "The cipher. Has anyone rotated it? Flipped it? Looked at it from the opposite direction?" Another pause. Then Yuna's voice came back, suddenly very awake. "I do not think so. I do not think anyone ever tried. We need to try. Right now. Junho, I cannot just walk into the research center and flip their hologram. They would throw me out. Then find Kelix. Tell her. Make her understand. Please, Yuna. I know this sounds crazy, but I think I'm right." Through the communicator, he heard Yuna take a deep breath. "Okay," she said. "I will try. But if this makes me look like a fool, you are buying my drinks for a year. If I am wrong, I will buy your drinks for the rest of my life." Yuna ended the call. Junho sat on his bed, holding his notebook. Outside his window, the stars watched in silence. Somewhere in the darkness, the artifact pulsed again, and for the first time in 200 years, someone was about to look at it differently. The puzzle took Supercomputers years. He tilted his head and said, "Just turn it upside down." Part 3 Kelix stood in her private lab, staring at the small holographic display on her desk. Yuna stood beside her, hands clasped together nervously. "You want me to rotate the cipher 180 degrees, Kelix said slowly. "Based on the theory of a maintenance worker. He is not just a maintenance worker. He was a puzzle champion back on Earth. Human puzzles. Games with colored blocks and simple patterns. The axiom cipher is the most complex mathematical structure ever discovered." Yuna stepped closer. "And your greatest minds have failed to solve it for 200 years. Maybe complexity is not what it needs. Maybe it needs fresh eyes." Kelix's crystal skin flickered with different colors. This was how Melkari showed emotion. Right now, the colors suggested a mix of doubt and curiosity. "My people have spent lifetimes on this problem," Kelix said. "If I do this and it leads nowhere, I will look foolish. Worse, I will make Vethora look foolish. She has dedicated 47 years to this work. And if it leads somewhere?" Kelix was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to her console. "I will run a private simulation. No one else needs to know about this unless we find something." She entered commands into the system. The holographic display flickered. Slowly, the image of the cipher began to rotate. Yuna held her breath. The rotation completed. The cipher now appeared upside down compared to how everyone had always viewed it. For a second, nothing happened. Then Kelix made a sound that Yuna had never heard before. It was something between a gasp and a cry. By the first light, Kelix whispered, "Look at it." Yuna looked, and she saw what 200 years of science had missed. The chaotic patterns now formed clear, elegant shapes. The random curves became flowing rivers of logic. The symbols that had seemed scattered now connected in obvious sequences. was like watching a scrambled picture suddenly snap into focus. "The equations," Calix said, her voice shaking. "They form complete structures now. They make sense. They actually make sense." Yuna grabbed her communicator and called Junho. He answered immediately. "You were right," Yuna said. She could barely contain her excitement. "Junho, you were right." The whole thing was upside down. On the other end, she heard Junho let out a long breath. "Thank you for believing me. What do we do now?" "Show the others. Show everyone." Calix was already moving toward the door. "I must tell Vethora. She needs to see this." They hurried through the corridors of the research section. Scientists moved past them, too busy with their own work to notice. The station shook slightly as another pulse came from the artifact. Vethora's main laboratory was at the heart of the research section. It was a large room filled with holographic displays and advanced equipment. The lead scientist stood at the center, reviewing data with several other Melkari. "Calix," Vethora said, turning to face her assistant. "You should be preparing for the evacuation. All junior staff are being moved to the safety vessels." "Master Vethora, I have discovered something. Something important. The cipher. We have no time for theories, Calix. The artifact's pulses are accelerating. We estimate 12 hours before whatever is going to happen, happens. But this is different. I found the solution." Every Melkari in the room stopped moving. Vethora's crystal skin flashed with sharp, bright colors. "You found the solution," she repeated. Her voice was cold. "In a few hours, you accomplished what centuries of work could not." "Not me. A human. A maintenance worker named Park Junho. He noticed that we have been viewing the cipher from the wrong orientation. When you rotate it 180 degrees, stop." Vethora raised one of her 6 hands. "You are telling me that a human who repairs air vents has solved the greatest puzzle in galactic history? By turning it upside down?" "Yes, that is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Please, just look at the simulation. I have the data. 5 minutes of your time. That is all I ask." Vethora's colors shifted to deep purple, a sign of frustration. But she nodded once. "Show me." Calix transferred her simulation to the main display. The other scientists gathered around, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. The hologram appeared, showing the cipher in its original orientation. Then, slowly, it rotated dot. When the rotation finished, the room fell completely silent. Vethora stepped closer to the display. Her colors changed rapidly, cycling through emotions too fast to read. She reached out one crystalline hand, almost touching the holographic symbols. "All these years," she said softly. "All these centuries. And it was so simple." "The first explorers who found the artifact were Kelthani," Calix explained. "They documented everything from their standard orientation. Every species after them just accepted that viewpoint. No one thought to question it, because why would they?" Vethora turned to face her assistant. The Kelthani were a proud and ancient race. Their scientific methods were respected throughout the galaxy. To suggest they made such a basic error would have been an insult. But they did make an error. Yes, they did. Vethora looked at Yuna, who stood quietly near the door. And a human saw it. A human who fixes broken machines. At that moment, another pulse shook the station. This one was stronger than before. Alarms began to sound. "The evacuation is accelerating," one of the scientists reported. "We have less time than we thought." "Wait," Calix said, staring at the rotated cipher. "The solution is clear now. I can read it. The precursors left a message. What does it say?" Calix's colors faded to pale white. "It says this is not a puzzle about energy. It is a warning. The artifact is a beacon, and it has been counting down since it was first discovered." Counting down to what? To sending a signal. A signal that reaches out into the deep void and calls something to this location. The room erupted in chaos. Scientists shouted questions and orders. Emergency protocols activated throughout the station. In the middle of it all, Yuna pulled out her communicator and called Junho again. "You need to come here," she said. "Right now. I am supposed to evacuate. They put me on the list." "Forget the list. You just solved a puzzle that the greatest minds in the galaxy could not crack. They need to hear what else you might see." Prime Nexus Thol's voice suddenly filled the room, coming from speakers in the ceiling. "All senior staff report to the command center. The artifact has stopped pulsing." Everyone froze. "Stopped?" Vethora said. "What do you mean, stopped?" "The countdown has ended," Prime Nexus Thol said. "Bring the human who solved this cipher. Bring him immediately." Lee Tae-min appeared at the laboratory door. He had been listening from the corridor. He looked at Yuna. "Where is Park Junho?" "In his quarters. They were evacuating him." "Not anymore." Tae-min pulled up his own communicator. "Park, this is Lee Tae-min. Report to the main command center." "That is an order." Through the communicator, Junho's voice came back, confused but steady. "Yes, sir. On my way." Outside the station's windows, the artifact hung in the darkness of space. It had gone quiet for the first time in days, but in the deeper darkness beyond it, something was waking up, something that had been waiting for a very long time. The puzzle took Supercomputers years. He tilted his head and said, "Just turn it upside down." Part 4. The command center was the largest room on the station. Massive screens covered the walls, showing data from 1,000 different sensors. Representatives from all 23 species stood in their designated areas, connected by floating translation devices that turned their words into languages everyone could understand. Park Junho walked in and felt very small. He was still wearing his maintenance uniform. His hair was messy. He had not slept in over 20 hours. Around him stood the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Scientists, diplomats, military commanders. And they were all looking at him. Prime Nexus Thul floated at the center of the room, his purple gaseous form pulsing with energy. His voice came from everywhere at once. "Park Junho of Earth, you solved the Axiom cipher." It was not a question. Junho swallowed hard. I just noticed it was upside down, sir." "You noticed what 100 billion calculations could not determine. What the finest analytical minds of 23 species could not perceive." "Explain how." Junho felt Yuna's hand touch his arm briefly. She stood beside him, offering silent support. He took a breath. "When I was young, I had a book of optical illusions. Pictures that looked like one thing until you turn them around. Then they became something else. A duck became a rabbit. An old woman became a young girl. The image was the same, but your mind saw it differently." The room was silent. Junho continued. "When I looked at the cipher, my brain kept telling me something was wrong. The patterns felt upside down, like a face turned the wrong way. I could not explain it logically. I just felt it." Vethora stepped forward. Her crystal skin glowed with soft blue light. "Our computers analyzed every mathematical possibility. They examined the cipher from every theoretical angle. But they never physically rotated the image because the original documentation established a fixed orientation. And no one questioned it," Junho said. "Because questioning it would mean admitting that the first explorers made a mistake. And they were ancient and respected." "Humans are not bound by our history," Vethora said. "You do not know which species are ancient and respected. You do not carry our traditions. To you, the cipher was just a puzzle. And you approached it like a puzzle, not like a sacred artifact. One of the other scientists, a tall being covered in feathers, made a harsh sound. This is humiliating. A species that has been in space for 50 years solved what we could not in 200. It is not about years in space, Junho said quietly. It is about perspective. You are all brilliant. You built things humans cannot imagine. But sometimes being new means seeing things fresh, without assumptions. Prime Nexus Thol's form shifted. The human speaks truth. Now we must focus on what comes next. Calyx, present the translation. Calyx stepped up to the main display. With the cipher now properly oriented, she had been working on understanding its true message. The precursors did not hide energy technology in the cipher, she said. That was our assumption, based on incomplete understanding. The artifact is a beacon, and the cipher is a warning. She activated the display. Symbols flowed across the screen, now forming clear sentences. The message says, "We sleep, waiting for minds that see beyond themselves. Only those who question what is known can be trusted with what is to come. When this beacon activates, we will return to those who solved its test." The room stirred with confusion and concern. They are returning? The feathered scientist asked. The precursors died millions of years ago. Perhaps not, Calyx said. Perhaps they did not die. Perhaps they were waiting. Alarms suddenly filled the room. Every screen switched to show the same image. The dark void of space beyond the artifact thought something was appearing there. Something enormous. A shape emerged from what looked like a fold in reality itself. It was a ship, but unlike any ship ever seen. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers, covered in patterns that matched the cipher. It glowed with soft, ancient light. The precursor vessel, Prime Nexus Thol said. It was hidden in a dimensional pocket. The beacon has called it forth. Junho stared at the screen. His heart pounded in his chest. He had not expected this. He had just wanted to solve a puzzle. Now he had awakened an ancient civilization. What do we do? Someone asked. We communicate, Vethora said. That is why they left the puzzle. They wanted to find species capable of understanding them. But who speaks for us? The Avani commander's voice was uncertain. We have diplomats trained for first contact with new species, but none prepared for this. Prime Nexus Thol turned his attention to Junho. You solved their test. Perhaps you should be the one to greet them. Junho felt his stomach drop. Me? I fix air vents. I am not a diplomat. You are the one they were looking for. Someone who sees beyond assumptions. Someone who questions what others accept. I am not qualified. I do not even have clearance to enter most of the station. Yuna spoke up. Maybe that is exactly why it should be you. The precursors did not leave their test for leaders and politicians. They left it for someone who thinks differently. Someone who looks at problems without carrying old ideas. Vethora nodded slowly. The human female is correct. Park Junho represents what the precursors valued. Not power, not knowledge, perspective. Junho looked around the room. 23 species watched him. Beings of crystal and gas and feathers and forms he could not name. They were all ancient compared to humanity. They had all failed where he had succeeded, and now they wanted him to speak for them. I will try, he said finally. But I want Yuna with me. And Calyx. I need people who can translate and help me understand. Agreed, Prime Nexus Thol said. A small team. 3 individuals. You will represent the Galactic Science Collective in first contact with the precursor species. Lee Taemin pushed through the crowd to stand near Junho. I am proud of you, he said quietly. I knew there was something different about those sketches. Junho managed a small smile. Thank you for not throwing away my notebook. On the screens, the precursor vessel continued to materialize. Lights began to glow along its surface. Something inside was waking up. The artifact between the station and the ship pulsed once more. Not a countdown this time. A welcome. June-Ho straightened his maintenance uniform. It was wrinkled and stained with grease from the morning's work. He wished he had something better to wear for the most important moment in galactic history, but maybe that did not matter. Maybe the precursors would appreciate that he came as he was. A simple man who fixed things and liked puzzles. "Prepare a shuttle," Prime Nexus Thol commanded. "The human will meet the precursors." Jun-Ho took a deep breath. His mother and Bizin would never believe this story. Then again, neither would he. The puzzle took Supercomputers years. He tilted his head and said, "Just turn it upside down." Part 5. The shuttle was small. Just enough room for 3 people and a pilot. Jun-Ho sat near the window, watching as they approached the massive precursor vessel. Behind them, the station grew smaller. Ahead, the ancient ship filled the entire view. Yuna sat across from him, her hands gripping the edge of her seat. Kelix stood near the pilot, her crystal form flickering with nervous colors. "I have studied first contact procedures for years," Yuna said. "But this is different. These beings are older than any civilization we know." "Maybe they are kind," Jun-Ho said. "They left a puzzle instead of a weapon. That must mean something." "Or they wanted to find worthy prey," Kelix said. Her voice was flat. "We do not know their intentions." The shuttle slowed as it approached an opening in the precursor vessel. A door of light appeared, welcoming them inside. The pilot looked back at Jun-Ho. "Sir, the ship is inviting us to dock. Do we proceed?" Jun-Ho realized everyone was waiting for his decision. Him, the maintenance worker. "We proceed," he said. The shuttle passed through the light and entered a chamber larger than any building Jun-Ho had ever seen. The walls glowed with soft patterns. The air smelled clean and fresh, like a mountain after rain. Somehow, the ship had already adjusted its atmosphere for their species. They landed on a platform in the center of the chamber. As the shuttle door opened, Jun-Ho stepped out first. The precursors were waiting. They were not what he expected. They did not look like monsters or gods. They were tall, elegant beings with bodies that seemed made of flowing light. They had many limbs, but they moved with grace. Their faces, if they could be called faces, had many eyes that looked in all directions at once. One of them stepped forward. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in Jun-Ho's mind. "You are the one who saw truly." Jun-Ho bowed, uncertain if this was the right greeting. "I am Park Jun-Ho. I came from a planet called Earth. We know of Earth, a young world, a new species. Yet you solved what ancient minds could not." "I did not really solve it. I just looked at it differently." The precursor made a sound that might have been laughter. "That is solving. That is what we sought. Not intelligence. Not power, perspective." Yuna and Kelix had joined Jun-Ho on the platform. The precursor regarded them with its many eyes. "Why did you hide?" Kelix asked. "Why leave a puzzle instead of simply waiting?" "We grew tired of greatness," the precursor said. "Our civilization lasted for hundreds of millions of years. We solved every problem. We conquered every challenge. But in our greatness, we lost something. We lost the ability to see things fresh. Everything became routine. Everything became known." The precursor moved closer to Jun-Ho. "We realized that the greatest gift is a new perspective. A mind that questions. A spirit that wonders. So we created the test. We would sleep until someone came who could see what we could not. But the other species tried for 200 years, Jun-Ho said. They had the best computers, the most advanced science, and they all approached the problem the same way. They accepted the original framework without question. They built upon assumptions instead of challenging them. You were different. You were new enough to wonder if the picture was upside down. Yuna spoke carefully. What will you do now that you have awakened? We will share what we know. Our technology, our history, our understanding of the universe. But not as teachers to students, as partners to those who taught us something new. What could we possibly teach you? Calyx asked. You are millions of years more advanced. You taught us that wisdom can come from anywhere, that a maintenance worker might see what a master scientist cannot, that young eyes sometimes see clearest of all. The precursor turned back to Junho. We would like you to be our bridge to the other species. You understood us when no one else could. Perhaps you can help them understand as well. Junho felt overwhelmed. I am not a leader. I am not special. I just looked at a picture and turned it upside down. That is exactly why we choose you. The greatest barriers are not built from stone or metal. They are built from old ideas and fixed thinking. You break those barriers naturally. You do not even realize you are doing it. Hours later, Junho stood in the command center of the station again. But this time, everything was different. The precursor vessel hung peacefully in space beside the station. Representatives from all 23 species listened as the awakened beings shared their message. The universe was larger than anyone had imagined. There were wonders waiting to be discovered, dangers that needed to be faced together. And the precursors wanted to help, not conquer. Vethora approached Junho after the formal meeting ended. Her crystal skin glowed with warm colors. I spent 47 years on that puzzle, she said. I thought I would be remembered as the one who failed. Instead, I will be remembered as the one who was present when a human succeeded. I did not mean to make anyone feel bad. You did not. You reminded us of something important. Knowledge is valuable, but it can also be a prison. We become so sure of what we know that we forget to question it. Li Tae-min joined them. He clapped Junho on the shoulder. The folks back on Earth are going to want to hear this story. A maintenance worker from Korea who saved the galaxy by tilting his head. I did not save the galaxy. Not yet. But the precursors seem to think you are going to be important in the years ahead. They asked for you specifically to join their ambassador team. Junho shook his head in disbelief. I was supposed to be evacuated this morning. I was going to go back to cleaning vents. Yuna laughed. I think your vent cleaning days are over. Later that night, Junho stood alone in the observation deck. The precursor vessel glowed softly outside the window. Stars filled the darkness beyond. He thought about his mother and Bizin, about the puzzle competitions he used to enter, about all the times people had overlooked him because he was just the maintenance guy. None of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that he had seen something others could not. He had trusted his instincts even when logic said he was wrong. And somehow, that had changed everything. The precursor's words echoed in his mind. We have been waiting for minds like yours. Junho smiled. There were billions of humans back on Earth. Billions of people who thought differently, who questioned things, who looked at the world with fresh eyes. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was more than just a young species. They were a species that knew how to turn things upside down. And that made all the difference.